in the next 6 months, I'm going to be 100% AI on every meeting.
Damn.
Maybe not this podcast because, it's all I have really that makes me feel
This is
cool.
all I live for anymore?
This is all I have. My 300 something thousand fans in Pakistan.
We call them family now, Rich. That's our family.
My family. Without this podcast, I don't know what I would do.
Not much anymore.
No.
All right, there we go.
Welcome to the show, where air takes the floor. Lee and Rich on the mic.
Welcome to the AI Guys podcast, where we make artificial intelligence easy to understand for everyone. I'm your host, Lee Dixon, and as always, I'm joined by the next astronaut to take flight on Blue Horizon, Rich Swire.
Oh, yeah. I didn't realize that got out.
Yeah, Bezos let it slip.
Yeah, did he tweet it or something? Or
there's this whole the whole.
Oh, it was like an innuendo hint. It was like
they started dropping Easter eggs.
Okay.
Katy Perry came out and she put on a tattered white hat, and everyone was just like, "Is this a Rich Swire co-announcement?" But they had it off camera, so not many people caught it.
Well, breaking news here.
Yeah,
on the pod.
Well, we're gonna talk about how people are gonna be launching AI in the next few weeks here with a lot of conversation on perfect partnerships. So one of our previous episodes, we started talking about cost analysis, where people need to really be looking at investment into AI inside of their organization. I think now let's talk a little bit more about finding that right fit for their future plans. So touching and just briefly coming back around, finding the right AI partner is going to be key for a long-term play, but let's kind of go beyond just the tool and look at it from more of like a strategic collaborator position. That's where I find a lot of our conversations with clients tend to go. And even in the early discovery, it comes from a lot of people having concepts, but not really understanding what it takes to create that.
Yeah, I think we're in a situation where a lot of companies, startups all the way to large companies that we've talked to, are still thinking like AI is software. And I think that is the biggest inhibitor to a lot of what's possible, obviously what you can do with it. But it's also kind of just the comfortable thing where they throw that in the bucket and they treat it the same way that they treat software. And when you think about enterprise or even small companies buying software, it doesn't happen that often, right? Like we buy SaaS products here and there when we need some specific tool, but it's if a company buys a CRM system or they buy an ERP system or they buy a financial system, they don't rip that out every year or every 2 years. They're looking at like a 10-year or maybe a forever investment. And so I think what's happening is people think they see AI coming around the corner and they're kind of like being lackadaisical about it. They're like, oh, okay, Mel, we'll adopt that. Like they're still on Windows 95. Maybe at some point we'll upgrade to Windows 20 to whatever. Or
it's an industry that's just so used to old school software being their staple that they look at this as like, I don't really need it.
And so they also, that's mistake number one. Number two is that they're looking at the same people that evaluate their software or how they make software purchases, or they're thinking about how they are looking at AI through the same lens. And that's also a mistake because there are too many unknown knowns here, too many known unknowns too, where they're making decisions based on just completely wrong, just completely from the wrong vector, right? Because when you're thinking about buying software, you're thinking about features, you're thinking about how this implements, you're thinking about functionality, and then you're assuming there's going to be customization and things like that, but you're also kind of looking at best of breed, right? So like nobody got fired for buying Salesforce, but everybody hates Salesforce. So you have this kind of conundrum of like, all right, well...
We love to stomp on Salesforce on this podcast.
It's the worst. I mean, it could... And I'm not saying this.
This isn't directed, by the way, for anyone that does listen that uses Salesforce or maybe has worked with Salesforce. This is not directed.
It is arguably the worst piece of trash ever invented. Now, I will give them, the the benefit of the doubt of like being one of
Yeah.
the first cloud, SaaS products and, whatever.
Hmm.
But it is such trash. It's such crap. I mean, like,
Do you feel, I mean, I'm going to bring this back to the AI conversation though, but do you feel like the reason that, one, you have such strong feelings about it, of course we have clients that have gone in there, but is it because of this hyper customization that has been offered that has made things even harder to do within it? Like, I think the mark was missed with where we always kind of dunk on CRMs and like how people are still operating in spreadsheets, and it tends to be like the more customized someone takes something, the more they go, I can't even use this thing anymore. Let me just go back to a simple book of record. And I think that AI, as I bring all this full circle, right, I think that tends to be the same trap we're falling into, where someone wants to overcomplicate, over-engineer a role that they could be automating with AI tomorrow, but they're just thinking of it in such a complex way that they don't realize that what they want to possibly do might cost tens of thousands of dollars when the actual solution they want is just this. Does that make sense?
yeah, I mean, they're taking it down the same path. They think AI is software, and it's not.
Yeah.
AI is closer to human resource and work, right? So you want a task done, you train an AI agent to do it. If it needs to plug into XYZ software, you can integrate it, or you can just train it, let it rip, and just like you would a human, right? So, and I think it's just a completely different. It's just a completely different way of buying work. Whereas software, for the most part, as a tool, I think it would be fair to say that almost every company that has implemented software has over-engineered it, has thought that it would give a greater return on investment than it has, and for the most part, has gotten dramatically expensive comparative to what it started out to be.
Yeah, it's definitely inflated. And no one has ever bought a piece of software and said, "Oh, thank God you did." Right? It just becomes another kind of cog in the machine.
And by definition, when you have an industry that underdelivers, overpriced, becomes somewhat of a deterrent toward moving fast and being efficient, is actually now becoming more of a slowing you down. And also, a lot of these SaaS companies that are out there just have stopped innovating, right? They just stop because they don't need to, right? That is the recipe for disruption, and AI is going to absolutely come in and start replacing all of those core functions. Because what was the big promise of software? This big promise of software was, oh, you don't need as many people to do X, Y, and Z. But the reality is, it didn't really achieve that. And
Yeah,
it
didn't hit the
made
mark.
us more efficient. It created a book of records. It gave us a database, and so that we can easily query it and do reports and things like that, which is something we rarely do. But it's nice to have all your data there. But it never really gave us that uptick on efficiency, because what ended up happening is the minute you got efficient, they would add more features, add more functionality, and then you had to, and it kind of slowed things down. It got to be like,
or everyone became so granular with what they wanted to do with all those new functions and features,
So back to take this back to the topic. My point of this is that if you treat AI like software and you go down that path, and you also, by the way, if you choose to do business with the software companies that got us to this point, I think it's going to be a miserable decision that you're going to ultimately regret. So you have to think of AI. You have to find a partner that understands an AI first mentality, that understands that what they're there to do is build and automate work, and that AI on its own should be sufficient to automate a large portion of tasks that you currently have humans doing, and you were hoping software would do, but it never did. And then I think what's going to happen over the next 5 to 10 years is we're going to start moving a lot of that functionality off of the software, because it requires a human to do the work, right? Filling out forms and doing, navigating this menu, running this and doing that, getting that off the software platform into the AI, so the AI can automatically do it. And then ultimately allow your software to kind of become just a book of record, a glorified database. And then all that functionality becomes somewhat more malleable, more trainable, more customizable, without having to invest hundreds of thousands of dollars in customizing some software product that locks you in.
Just to feel like you access it.
You can train the AI, and the AIs will get smarter, and it'll train itself eventually. We have situations now where our AI agents are training themselves, right, based on the feedback that they're getting, based on the conversations they're having with customers.
Yeah.
Like, let's just beat up another example. Is
everyone's getting smoked today.
But like, let's just take a support system like Intercom, which is everybody uses it. Great, good for you.
Ooh, yay.
But like, what is Intercom? Intercom is a UI that requires a human to go on there and sit and literally look at software all day, and until somebody goes whoop, whoop, and there's a chat window pops up, and they go, "I have a question about the product," and the human goes, "Yay, I've got my, I'm here to answer you," and then it goes, and then they have a chat, and then eventually the human has to be smart enough to go, okay, I think that was a pretty good chat. Let me make that into a knowledge base article. And they have to write the knowledge base article by hand. It may not be a good one, but whatever. They put it in the knowledge base article that somebody can someday theoretically go to the help guide on your website that's buried deep in menu number 7 and search by that article keyword, hope to find that article, and then read 3 pages of the knowledge base article. Never happens.
For those listening at home, raise your hand if you've ever done it successfully.
No, nobody does that. Nobody goes to the help guide and searches and finds the 5th article and then reads the whole thing. They just go right back to that chat, right? Like, why would you?
It's because the process has become so cumbersome for a customer, right? It's the same reason we dial into a phone number. The minute we get a phone tree, people are just mashing 0, hoping to get to someone that can actually, not even someone, but something that can help them streamline the answer.
There's a reason why we all frustrate and hit 000 human. Well, guess what? AI is going to basically bypass all of that. It's going to take that entire
be
knowledge,
a more effective solution.
and then now you have AI answering those support tickets and AI writing those knowledge base articles.
Yep.
And you don't need all that other stuff. We've been sold that we need this stuff, and we don't. We don't need it. Nobody wants to sit in front of Intercom and answer chats about how do I change my password. Nobody wants to do all this. No human wants to do this work. And
there's a better quality of work you could be doing.
Nobody's benefiting it on both sides.
Right.
And so when you think about moving forward and deciding to take your business a different direction, you need a partner to do that, right? You need somebody who thinks about the world in this way, and it can't be the legacy software guys that want to keep you in this old way of thinking, which we all know in the deepness of our hearts that nobody uses this stuff at the scale that it should be, and therefore you're not getting the ROI that you were promised when you invested. It's obviously better than having nothing. So let's put it that way. So
no, of course.
But instead of having email support, having Intercom instead of that, okay, maybe that's a step up function wise. Maybe yes, at scale that helps you. But all the other stuff that they've thrown at you that is requiring more and more human intervention and more seat licenses. There's a reason why they want more humans using their product. It's because their financial model is based on seat licensing.
Having people use their product.
Right. So you take away seat licensing, you take away the fact that a human is needed to sit there in front of a chatbot or sit there and fill out CRM forms or whatever that they do, and replace that with AI. You need to have a wholesale mindset change. And so a partner that is helping you at the CIO, CEO level, all the way down to the functional level of working with your development team or working with your business stakeholders, that's what you need in order to, I think, really understand how AI can be integrated into your existing business. I'm not saying throw everything out and start over. What I'm saying is you need to kind of keep keep it separated from the investments that you've made and the workflows and the systems and the procedures that you've currently have, and think of AI as a new way of doing some of these things and start to propagate slowly one by one over to an AI first business. And I think that's the strategy that we obviously pitch to our clients, and the ones that embrace it, I think, have seen great success doing so.
Yeah, they've seen massive lift on that. And I do think, as we're kind of wrapping up here on a little mini episode, I do want to kind of highlight, not just from what we've experienced with our clients, but really the traits for anyone listening that is trying to figure out how to create a AI partnership with someone out there. But the traits of a perfect partnership isn't necessarily someone that you might have inside of your own walls. And I'm not saying it's because you need to shake things up or not be looking through rose-colored glasses, but it's really someone who can be aligned on your vision, but also provide transparency as to what you want to do and what is doable. Not to say that AI can't take on a lot more, but the vision of what someone actually is trying to execute can sometimes be difficult when it's coming from the internal teams that just say, this is what I want done, figure it out. But having somebody that's on the sidelines that can essentially be called on, brought in and say, hey, here's what we're trying to accomplish. What is the best way, AI first, to do that? And then having, myself, Rich, or someone in that kind of space be able to create a plan or give guidance on that is already in line with where that business or that organization needs to be. It makes the conversation so much easier, I think, to then take it back internally and say, okay, do we want to do this? Because if you're just treating it as, I would love to solve this massive problem, and a team member who's gung-ho says, I'll do it and we'll figure it out, you end up running into problems, pivoting, or projects take way longer than expected, and they're not executing even close to 100% of what you want. They might be at 50, and you're just like, stop spending money on this. It's close enough. Like, we don't want to do any more with this, or they just can it all together.
The reality is that AI is a vast landscape of knowledge that, unless you're in the business of doing AI, you're not even close to understanding all the different elements that you should be considering.
Exactly.
Everything from, and we've talked about it, but the multitude of tools that are out there, the transformation of existing softwares and what they are doing with AI, agentic platforms and frameworks, all these, the models. I mean, we have every 2 months a new model comes out. Anybody, unless you're full-time living and breathing this stuff, you're 2-3 years behind, and you're making decisions based on your viewpoints at one specific point of view, where you might have some experience building out something. You might be a developer who got really curious about how this stuff works, and you might spun up something really easily, or you might be a business stakeholder that thinks of themselves as an expert in ChatGPT. And these are all qualifications in the scheme of things. When nobody else in your business knows anything about AI, you by default become the expert. But the reality is, and I'm not saying those people still shouldn't be involved, and they should be more curious, and they should want to bring in outside help to evolve what they've already done. But this is one of those cases where things are moving too fast. The world is being disrupted. The disruption is too great to hope and pray that whatever knowledge you have is internally in your company, because all of this is being innovated on the edge.
Exactly.
And you have to reach out to these experts. You have to embrace the fact that there's a lot of stuff that is available to you, but not necessarily inside of your business. And by reaching out and finding those partnerships and bringing in consultative experts is going to only allow you to open your mind to what's possible. And that will allow you to allocate your time and energy and those people that were interested in solving problems in a more directed manner.
100%.
There's a reason why, consultants or, experts exist, because they are ones that are kind of having one foot, actually doing the work, and maybe they have experience in your industry and understand how to implement, and they've done it for other companies, but they also have one eye on the future, where they're saying, I'm also a student of what's happening out in the field, meaning like what's coming next. And so, like with anything else, you want to, skate where the puck is going.
Mm-hmm.
And where I think a lot of people underestimate is the resource allocation that it takes to actually execute these projects at scale and at a high quality, so that they're sustainable and they actually can deliver good results. And you don't want to be slowed down by having it's going to take 6 to 12 months to learn or to experiment, and before you actually get to the point where you can execute. And that's why you should definitely reach out and find people that could add their 2 cents, and also, like I said before, uncover those unknown unknowns, right? That things that you don't even know are happening or existing, or what possibilities are out there. And you end up going down one path, which is you might want to go down the other. I make this argument, I'll just make this one final point about how critical of a decision these things are today is, we come from, we have a lot of colleagues in the software world, and I'm making this argument all the time, of which, there's a lot of pushback, and this is still very much a Pepsi Coke, challenge out there, which is, do you take, from a software development perspective, would you take your existing software that you've built, maybe it was over years and maybe there's some tech debt, but it's relatively, you have a big install base, you don't want to rip it out and replace it. You don't want to do a complete rebuild because that would take so much more time with humans. But now with AI and the ability to develop it, you could develop code and develop applications from scratch using AI. Should you either use it to augment and fix and debug and work on your existing code base, or should you go and say, well, we're going to make this a completely an AI generated stack, knowing what we know, all that expertise and all that knowledge of how our application works, but let AI rebuild it, reimagine it in a better way.
Yeah.
And I would, I've made this argument, although, we yet to prove it out because we're still in early days. So it'll be interesting to see what happens in 5 years when we look back on this podcast and say, wow, look, Rich was completely wrong or right. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I would say that if I was a company and I was a CIO, CTO, and I'm looking at a product and I see AI as a future, and I see human user interfaces as a future, and I see AI as the ultimate coder in the future, I would argue I'll take the hits and licks now of the challenges of rebuilding this stack from ground up with AI versus maybe throwing AI at it and trying to kind of patch it up, duct tape here, and maybe AI can have some incremental lift for the short term, but eventually, because AI didn't write it from scratch, it might be limited on what it can do. And you're still having humans come in there and mess it all up. So I'm obviously a big believer that it's one of those things where it's a big decision to make, and to have experts surrounding you and having, people that understand what's possible. That's something that you should do now. And so that it saves you.
Start laying the groundwork.
Yeah.
Start laying the groundwork. Find a strategic partner that is outside of the organization that can come in and accelerate the internal learning, but also be the conduit to actually bring these things to fruition.
Yeah. Just bring people, surround yourself with smart people. This is all new to everybody. The more decisions you have to make now are going to reflect what's going to ultimately be the outcome in 4 or 5 years. So make good decisions now versus kind of tinkering and waddling through it. And that's, I think, the best advice that I can give.
It's the only reason I do this podcast is to surround myself with smart people.
Exactly.
So here we go. Well, for everyone listening, thanks again for joining us on this episode. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button to stay in touch. Also, check out our Substack for more content, which will be linked to this episode to continue this discussion. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and we'll see you on the next episode. Take care, everyone.
Welcome to the show.